So you want to dive into chemtrails, huh? Listeners sure seem to have an appetite for this one. Guess it's one of those theories that never really goes away.
It's like a fly you can't quite swat away, keeps coming back every time you think it's gone.
And like most good conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
there's just enough there to make you wonder, right? I mean, we've all looked up at those streaks across the sky.
Right, those contrails.
Yeah, the condensation trails. But the chemtrail theory, well, that takes those ordinary white lines and turns them into something a whole lot more sinister.
Basically, it suggests those trails aren't just ice crystals, but rather evidence of a secret, large-scale spraying program.
Exactly. And it's not just harmless water vapor they're supposedly spewing, right?
Right.
We're talking chemicals, maybe even biological agents, all released on a unsuspecting public.
The motives attributed to these shadowy sprayers, they really run the gamut. Everything from controlling the weather to, well, more nefarious stuff.
Population control, even.
Oh yeah, that one's a classic. The theory itself popped up in the late 90s, fueled in part by some folks misinterpreting a U.S. Air Force paper on weather modification.
So they took something intended as research, maybe even hypothetical, and turned it into proof of a massive conspiracy. Classic.
Pretty much. And despite numerous government agencies debunking this whole thing, EPA, FAA, even NASA's weighed in, it just won't die.
It's like they say a rumor travels around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes.
Something like that.
The internet and talk radio, they haven't exactly helped matters either, have they?
Not at all. They've been like accelerants on this fire. But it's not just the word of mouth, right? There's that evidence of people point to those contrails that linger for hours, sometimes forming grid-like patterns.
And the different colors people claim to see, right? Like that must mean they're spraying different chemicals.
Right. And then there are those photos of tanks and spraying equipment that make their rounds online.
Wait, so there are photos of planes spraying stuff?
Not quite. See, those photos are usually just showing equipment used for ballast testing during flight. It's perfectly normal, helps ensure the plane's balanced and safe.
So another case of context is everything.
Exactly. Often, what seems suspicious at first glance has a much simpler explanation.
But of course, that doesn't stop the speculation, does it?
Doesn't.
So let's talk about the reasons people give for these supposed chemtrail spraying sprees. They get pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, some of the more out there theories involve, like, population control, right? It's like something straight out of a dystopian novel.
Right. Or the idea that they're messing with the weather, creating droughts, floods, you name it.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Then there's the whole biological weapons angle, which is unsettling, to say the least.
Definitely not something you want to think about too hard. And then you've got folks connecting chemtrails to HARP,
Yeah.
you know, that research facility up in Alaska.
Right, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It studies the ionosphere, that layer of the Earth's atmosphere loaded with ions and electrons, really important for radio communications and all that.
Okay, so what does HARP have to do with chemtrails in people's minds?
Well, because it involves shooting radio waves into the atmosphere, some people see it as, like, this weaponized technology. But really, it's just doing important scientific work.
Right. It's just that the technology itself can sound kind of scary if you don't get the science behind it.
Exactly. And that's often how these theories get their hooks in, right? Something seems unexplained or even a little creepy, and boom, suddenly everyone's connecting dots that maybe shouldn't be connected.
Like that whole thing a few years back with that Louisiana TV station. They claimed to have found, what was it, barium, after some supposed chemtrail spraying.
Oh, right. That report went viral, but it turned out the equipment they used to measure the barium levels was totally messed up, like not calibrated correctly at all.
So their readings were completely off.
Way off. In reality, the barium levels they detected were totally normal, nothing to be alarmed about.
So another reminder to take everything you see online, especially the sensational stuff, with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. And what about that grainy video everyone was passing around? The one with the plane seemingly spraying something at night?
Yeah, I remember that one. It seemed pretty damning at the time.
Well, that's another case of misinterpreting something totally natural. Experts who looked at the footage said it was just the way the plane's wings were, like, disrupting the air, and it was made visible because it was foggy that night.
Wild how quickly a blurry video or a, what do they call it, a misreported news story can blow up online and add fuel to the conspiracy fire.
It's kind of scary, honestly, which is why, understanding the actual science behind contrails is so important.
So remind us how DO contrails form.
Basically, you've got that hot, humid exhaust coming from the jet engines, right? And at those high altitudes, the air is incredibly cold.
So you've got these two extremes colliding.
Exactly.
Uh,
Think of it like when you breathe out on a super cold day and you see your breath. The water vapor in your breath condenses into those little droplets because the cold air just can't hold that much moisture.
and with those jets, instead of water droplets, it's ice crystals that form.
Bingo! The water vapor in the exhaust condenses and freezes super fast, creating those white trails we see. And they can stick around for hours, sometimes spreading out and creating those patterns in the sky that freak some people out.
Right, the grid-like patterns, all that. But that's all explainable by natural atmospheric conditions, right?
Absolutely. The wind at those high altitudes, the temperature, the humidity, they all play a part in how those contrails form and, kind of morph over time. It's like watching this massive slow motion weather experiment unfold up in the sky.
It does make you think, though. If you were trying to run a super secret global spraying operation, wouldn't you make it a little less obvious than, giant white streaks everyone can see?
You'd think. It'd be like trying to hide I don't know, a parade float in a parking garage.
Right. So if the science is solid and the evidence for chemtrails is, well, questionable at best, why do you think this theory has such staying power? Why do people cling to it so tightly? Yeah, it's like this theory has really wormed its way into our collective psyche or something.
It really has, in a way. But to get why people hold on to this theory so strongly, even with all the science saying otherwise, well, I think we got to look past the science itself.
You're talking about the psychology driving it all, right?
Exactly. For some folks, these types of theories, they offer a feeling of control in a world that feels pretty chaotic a lot of the time. It's like believing that somebody somewhere is calling the shots, even if those shots aren't exactly on the up and up.
So instead of just chalking it up to, like, natural occurrences, which, I mean, let's face it, can seem kind of random and unpredictable, it's more comforting to believe there's a plan, right? Like a puppet master pulling all the strings.
Yeah, you got it. It's a way to make sense of things that seem too big or too complex to really wrap your head around. Otherwise, it's just chaos, right?
And then there's that whole allure of feeling like you're in the know, right? Like you've got this secret knowledge most people are clueless about.
Oh, absolutely. It's like joining a secret society or something. You've got this exclusive info. It can be pretty intoxicating. Plus, never underestimate the power of belief once it takes hold.
That's true. Some people talk about when they first heard about chemtrails, it was like this life-changing revelation, like suddenly everything made sense.
It's like a light bulb moment, right? This big awakening where the scales fall from their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And once that happens, it's tough to shake that feeling, even when you've got facts staring you right in the face.
It's like those folks who build those, what are they called? Cloud busters, those homemade contraptions that are supposed to, disperse chemtrails. I mean, they're putting their money where their mouth is, right? Investing time and energy into fighting something they truly believe is a threat.
No doubt. It shows how powerful belief can be. But at the end of the day, we got to come back to good old Occam's razor, right?
Yeah.
The simplest answer is usually the right one. And in this situation, the idea of this gigantic global spraying program going on with thousands of people in on it for decades, it kind of stretches believability, don't you think?
Yeah, it does take a pretty big leap of faith, especially when you've got a perfectly sound scientific explanation for contrails already.
Exactly. We know how they form, why they hang around so long, why they make those patterns in the sky. It's all pretty straightforward. And while it's great to be curious and question what you see and hear, especially these days, we got to be careful not to get carried away with speculation.
So to wrap things up, next time you're gazing up at those white lines crisscross the sky,
Yeah.
remember, it's way more likely to be basic physics and weather patterns than some grand scheme to, control the population or unleash a bioweapon.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a classic example of a simple misunderstanding blown way out of proportion. Add a dash of fear and mistrust, and boom, you've got yourself a full-blown conspiracy theory.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another deep dive into the world of conspiracy theories successfully navigated. And hey, while we're at it, let's give a big shout out to our listeners for sending in their suggestions. Keep them coming. We love digging into this stuff with you.
Absolutely. Always up for a good exploration.
Until next time, keep those curiosity engines running and we'll see you on the flip side.